I knew something was wrong the second Vanessa from management smiled at me. Not a normal smile. Not the kind people make when they pass you in the hallway or ask if you've seen the printer paper. No. This was the kind of smile people wear when they've already decided your life is about to get significantly worse, and they're enjoying the fact that you don't know it yet. It was 8:17 on a Tuesday morning. I remember the exact time because I had just finished updating the overnight logistics discrepancy report for one of our biggest retail partners, and timing was basically my entire life at that company. I worked at North Bay Distribution Solutions. Fancy name. In reality, it was a giant logistics company that handled warehouse routing, freight coordination, supply chain auditing, and contract management for about 40 national retailers. Nobody noticed people like me. That was the whole point. The sales team got awards. Executives got bonuses. Marketing got catered lunches. Meanwhile, I spent my days in a corner office with no windows staring at spreadsheets that decided whether millions of dollars worth of freight ended up in the correct state. I wasn't glamorous. I was useful. Very useful. The kind of useful companies forget exists until something catches fire. My desk sat near the back wall of operations. No decorations. No family photos. No inspirational quotes. Just 2 monitors, a legal pad full of handwritten notes, a half-empty water bottle, and the same black coffee I'd been reheating since 7:30. I liked it that way. Quiet meant I could work. Work meant numbers. Numbers meant control. And control meant people usually left me alone. Usually. That morning I was halfway through verifying a delayed shipment chain involving 3 warehouse facilities in Arizona, when Vanessa appeared beside my desk. She smelled aggressively like expensive perfume. The kind that enters a room before the person does. She crossed her arms. Still smiling. Claire. I looked up. Morning. She tilted her head slightly. Can I see you in conference room B? No explanation. That was never good. I stared at her for a second. Now. She nodded. Immediately. I saved my report. Locked my screen. Stood up. The entire operations floor suddenly became very interested in pretending they weren't listening. I noticed that immediately. Jason from procurement stopped typing. Megan from inventory suddenly looked down at her phone. Even Carlos near receiving had that uncomfortable expression people wear when they know something bad is happening, but don't want to become part of it. Interesting. Vanessa walked ahead of me without saying another word. Conference room B was small. Glass walls. White table. 1 dying plant near the corner. Inside sat Greg. Regional Operations Director. 45 years old. Expensive suit. Perfect haircut. The type of guy who constantly said phrases like synergy optimization, while having absolutely no idea how the actual system worked. A folder sat in front of him. My name was on it. That was new. Vanessa closed the door behind me. Greg folded his hands. Claire, please sit. I stayed standing. I'd rather not. He exchanged a look with Vanessa, then sighed dramatically, like somehow I was making this harder for him. Finally, he opened the folder. After reviewing several internal concerns regarding repeated violations of workplace policy, I blinked. Wait, what? Management has decided to terminate your employment effective immediately. The room suddenly felt very quiet. I stared at him. No anger. No panic. Just confusion. I actually laughed. A short laugh. Because my brain genuinely thought this had to be some bizarre misunderstanding. I'm sorry. I leaned forward. What exactly are you firing me for? Vanessa answered before Greg could. Repeated unauthorized after-hours system access. I frowned. What? She straightened her blazer. You've been logging into company systems between midnight and 5 a.m. consistently for several months. I stared at her. Then Greg. Then back at her. Of course I have. Vanessa narrowed her eyes. I continued. I'm responsible for overnight freight discrepancy monitoring. Greg shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa interrupted. Employees are prohibited from accessing internal systems remotely without management approval. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I genuinely wondered if either of these people understood what I actually did for a living. I pointed toward the folder. Did either of you read my employment contract? Greg cleared his throat. This isn't a negotiation. No. I said quietly. It's apparently a comedy show. Vanessa's expression hardened immediately. Greg pushed a paper toward me. Please sign acknowledging termination. I stared at the document. 3 years. 3 promotions. 0 disciplinary reports. Dozens of overnight crisis interventions. And somehow I was sitting in a conference room being fired because management discovered I worked too much. I looked at Vanessa. Who reported this? She smiled again. Same cold smile. IT security flagged unusual login patterns. I nodded slowly. Of course. Last month corporate hired an external security auditing firm. Some genius probably saw my overnight access records and flagged me without asking a single question. Amazing. I looked back down. Reason for termination. Violation of internal access security policy. I almost admired the stupidity. Almost. Still. I signed. Vanessa stood immediately. You'll need to surrender your badge. I unclipped it. Placed it on the table. Greg added quietly. Your desk will be packed for you. That irritated me more than getting fired. I'd spent years building systems nobody else understood. And now apparently I wasn't even trusted to pack my own notebook. I turned toward the door. Then stopped. Something hit me. A thought. A very specific thought. I turned slowly back toward Greg. Quick question. He looked up. Yes. I smiled. The first real smile I'd made all morning. Who exactly do you think manages the overnight autonomous routing override system? Silence. Greg frowned. Vanessa crossed her arms. I continued. You know. I pointed upward vaguely. The automated rerouting software currently controlling all temperature-sensitive pharmaceutical shipments in transit across 8 states. Greg blinked. Vanessa looked annoyed. Neither answered. That told me everything. They didn't know. They had absolutely no idea what I did. I nodded slowly. Interesting. Very interesting. I walked out. No one said goodbye. No one looked at me. The elevator ride down felt surreal. In the lobby I pulled out my phone. Opened company email. Forwarded exactly 1 document to my personal encrypted archive. Subject line. Emergency routing architecture. Level 3 automated intervention protocol. Then I stepped outside into cold October air. And finally laughed. Because North Bay Distribution had just fired the only employee legally certified to supervise their autonomous pharmaceutical shipping compliance network. And somewhere above me, inside that building, nobody had figured out yet that in exactly 6 hours, their entire logistics system was about to begin failing, 1 shipment at a time. And once it started, there would be no way to stop it. Not without me. The funny thing about corporate disasters is that they never happen all at once. Movies lie about that. Real collapse doesn't come with explosions or alarms. It starts quietly. A missed alert. An unanswered notification. 1 tiny system failure no one notices because everyone assumes somebody else is handling it. I knew exactly how long I had. 5 hours. 38 minutes. That was how long the autonomous routing network could operate without a certified supervisor, manually validating anomaly flags. After that, the system entered restricted fallback mode, which sounds harmless. It wasn't. By the time I got home, North Bay still had no idea what was happening. I lived alone in a small apartment about 15 minutes from downtown. Nothing fancy. 3rd floor. Thin walls. Neighbors who fought constantly. Kitchen sink that leaked whenever I ran hot water. I tossed my purse on the couch and kicked off my heels. For the first time in 3 years, I had nowhere to be. No overnight shipment reviews. No emergency route corrections. No warehouse escalation calls at 2 in the morning. I should have felt angry. Instead, I felt curious. I walked into the kitchen and opened my laptop. Old habit. Years working logistics had basically rewired my brain. I typed in my credentials automatically. Access denied. Right. Forgot. No longer employed. I stared at the screen for a second, then smiled. Because I didn't need internal access. I already knew what was coming. See, about 2 years earlier North Bay launched something called Project Atlas. Massive internal automation program. Executives loved talking about it. Investors loved hearing about it. Press releases described it as revolutionary. Artificial intelligence. machine learning logistics, autonomous freight optimization, buzzword paradise. What nobody outside operations understood. I built half of it. Not the software itself, the compliance framework, the safety protocols, the override architecture, the thing preventing automated shipping decisions from violating federal transportation regulations. And because pharmaceutical shipments involve temperature-sensitive medical products, the system legally required certified human oversight. Not optional. Mandatory. Guess who held that certification? Me. Exclusively me. I had reminded management about this multiple times. Actually, I'd sent emails. Lots of emails. Documented warnings. Compliance memos. Escalation notices. Most got ignored. Executives hate documentation. Documentation means accountability. At exactly 2:41 p.m. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Silence. Then a nervous male voice. Claire. I recognized him immediately. Jason. Junior systems analyst. Operations floor. Hey. He exhaled sharply. Oh, thank God. I sat down slowly. What happened? Silence. Then, the Arizona shipment network stopped responding. There it was. Right on schedule. I leaned back. MHM. Jason continued quickly. We've got 6 refrigerated pharmaceutical shipments stuck in automated reroute loop. I stayed quiet. He lowered his voice. Greg's freaking out. I smiled slightly. Of course he was. How bad? Jason hesitated. System says manual compliance authorization required. Correct. Pause. Then, it's asking for level 3 supervisor override. Also correct. Another pause. Then very quietly. It says authorized personnel unavailable. I stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, rain had started falling against the glass. Beautiful timing. Jason spoke again. Claire. I could hear panic now. What does that mean? I answered simply. It means your pharmaceutical shipments can't legally move. Silence. Then, oh my God. I leaned against the wall. You guys fired the supervisor credential attached to Atlas. No. Jason said immediately. No, Greg said you handled spreadsheets. I closed my eyes. Actually laughed this time. Spreadsheets. 3 years building the most critical compliance architecture in the company. And Greg thought I handled spreadsheets. Amazing. Jason lowered his voice. They're calling emergency IT right now. Won't help. Why? Because this isn't a software issue. I paused. Then added. It's federal compliance architecture. He didn't answer. Poor kid. Probably realizing the entire building was on fire. Metaphorically. For now. Then another voice suddenly came through the phone. Sharp. Aggressive. Female. Vanessa. Claire. I smiled immediately. There she was. Hello, Vanessa. Her tone had changed. No perfume this time. Pure panic. We need you to log in immediately. Interesting. No apology. No explanation. Straight to demands. I sat back down. No. Pause. You're still under contractual confidentiality obligations. I laughed. Actually loud enough she probably heard it through the speaker. Vanessa. My voice went very calm. You terminated me 4 hours ago. She inhaled sharply. I continued. You listed my termination reason as security violation. Silence. Then. Yes. Which means under federal transport compliance policy. I opened one of my archived PDF files. Scrolled down. Read directly. All system credentials attached to my supervisor certification are now automatically revoked pending internal investigation. Long silence. I could practically hear her heartbeat through the phone. Finally. What does that mean? I smiled. It means even if I wanted to help. I paused deliberately. I legally can't. No response. Then suddenly Greg's voice in background. Shouting. Muffled chaos. Phones ringing. Someone yelling about Chicago distribution center. Interesting. Faster than I expected. Vanessa came back. Her voice lower now. How many shipments are affected? I stared at rain sliding down my apartment window. Right now. I checked the timestamp. Probably 9. Silence. I continued. In about 2 hours. I opened another logistics map. It'll be 27. Jason whispered something in background. Greg shouted louder. Then Vanessa asked quietly, "How do we fix this?" I answered honestly, "You don't." Pause. Then, "You fired me under compliance misconduct." Silence again. Then I added, "That designation triggered automatic suspension of all supervisory routing certifications linked to Atlas." I could hear papers moving frantically somewhere. Someone typing fast. Greg shouting. Jason saying something about warehouse temperatures. Vanessa finally spoke. Barely audible. "Can this be reversed?" I smiled. That question told me everything. They were scared now. Good. I answered slowly. "Maybe." "How?" "You'd need federal transportation authorization." "How long?" I checked another archived document. "Usually." I pretended to calculate. 2 to 3 weeks. Her breathing changed. I decided to finish it. And by then every pharmaceutical contract attached to Atlas will be in violation. Dead silence. Then the call disconnected. I sat there quietly. Rain outside. Laptop open. Phone still warm in my hand. And for the first time all day, I understood exactly what they had done. This wasn't some office misunderstanding. This wasn't bad management. This was catastrophic incompetence. North Bay Distribution had built an entire multimillion-dollar infrastructure around systems they didn't understand. Systems they assumed would simply continue functioning forever. Because people like me made sure they did. Invisible people. Quiet people. The ones nobody thanked. The ones nobody noticed. Until they disappeared. At exactly 4:12 p.m. My phone rang again. Different number. Corporate line. I let it ring twice. Then answered. A deep unfamiliar voice. Measured. Careful. "Miss Carter." I frowned. Not Greg. Not Vanessa. Different. "Yes. This is Richard Hale." Pause. Recognition hit instantly. Chief Operating Officer. I'd only spoken to him twice in 3 years. Which meant one thing. Things were very bad. He continued. "I understand there may have been." He paused carefully. "A misunderstanding regarding your termination." I stared forward. Interesting. The big executives had entered the game. That meant lower management had already lost control. I stood slowly. Walked toward the kitchen. Opened the fridge. Grabbed bottled water. Then answered quietly. "No." Long silence. Finally I said. "There was no misunderstanding." I twisted the cap. Took a sip. Then smiled. "You fired the wrong woman." And somewhere. Inside North Bay headquarters. $27 million worth of medical shipments. Had just stopped moving. I slept better that night than I had in months. That probably sounds strange. Most people think losing your job should feel devastating. Maybe it should have. 3 years at North Bay. Countless overnight emergencies. Weekends sacrificed. Vacations interrupted because some warehouse in Nevada forgot how refrigeration protocols worked. I gave that company everything. And somehow, I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in years. Maybe because for the first time, their disaster wasn't my responsibility. It was 6:32 a.m. When I made coffee. No alarms. No company Slack notifications. No overnight escalation reports. Just silence. The kind of silence you only notice after spending years drowning in corporate noise. I sat barefoot at my kitchen counter staring at my laptop. Then my phone buzzed. 7 missed calls. 4 emails. 2 voicemails. All North Bay. Cute. I ignored every single one. Instead, I opened a folder sitting on my desktop. One I'd been quietly maintaining for nearly 18 months. Its name was simple. Atlas Compliance Archive. Inside sat every document I'd ever sent management warning them about vulnerabilities in Project Atlas. Internal memos. Certification renewal notices. Risk assessments. Federal transportation compliance requirements. At least 23 separate emails where I explicitly explained one very important fact. The autonomous pharmaceutical network legally required certified human oversight. Without that oversight, operations became non-compliant. I clicked open the most recent memo. Sent 6 weeks earlier. Recipient: Greg Dawson, Regional Operations Director. Subject: Urgent compliance review required. I reread one section slowly. Failure to maintain active Level 3 supervisory certification may trigger automatic suspension of automated pharmaceutical transport permissions under Federal Interstate Medical Logistics Regulation Code 48A. I remembered sending it. Greg replied exactly 4 minutes later. His response had been 4 words. Asterisk handled. No further action. Asterisk handled. I smiled. Apparently not. At 8:03 a.m. My phone rang again. This time, I answered. Richard Hale, Chief Operating Officer. His voice sounded completely different today. Yesterday he sounded confident, polished, executive. Today, he sounded exhausted. Claire. Morning, Richard. No small talk. Straight business. We need to discuss a resolution. I leaned back in my chair. Interesting wording. Not asterisk help us. Asterisk. Not asterisk we made a mistake. Asterisk. Resolution. Like this was a mutual problem. I stayed quiet. He continued. We're experiencing operational disruptions connected to Atlas. Obviously. Pause. Then carefully. We'd like to reinstate your employment immediately. I almost laughed. Not apology. Not accountability. Just reverse the firing. Like deleting an email. I stood and walked slowly toward the window. Cars below moved through early traffic. People going to jobs they probably hated. I wondered how many of them kept companies alive without knowing it. Richard spoke again. Claire. I answered calmly. No. Long silence. Then. I see. I continued. You terminated me under security misconduct. Yes. That permanently invalidated my Federal Supervisory Transport certification. Pause. Then. We can fix paperwork. I smiled. There it was. Executive thinking. Paperwork solves everything. I opened another archived file. Scrolled down. Read quietly. No, Richard. Silence. Then I read directly. Federal certification suspension under misconduct review cannot be reinstated internally and requires independent regulatory approval. I heard him breathing. Then papers moving. Someone speaking quietly near him. Boardroom probably. They had escalated fast. Good. He asked quietly. How long for recertification? Best case. Yes. 20 days. Dead silence. Then I decided to help. A little. Richard. Yes. Do you know how much refrigerated inventory Atlas currently manages? No answer. So I answered for him. 32 active pharmaceutical contracts. More silence. I opened shipment dashboard backups. Continued speaking. 21 interstate medical suppliers. Pause. For hospital emergency inventory chains. Longer pause. And approximately. I checked one number. $48 million of temperature-sensitive inventory currently frozen in routing quarantine. Nothing. Absolute silence. Then finally. Jesus. Exactly. I walked back toward the kitchen. Coffee still warm. I took another sip. Richard's voice returned. Lower now. Serious. What do you want? Interesting. Very interesting. They'd moved quickly. No denial. No excuses. Straight negotiation. I sat down slowly. What do I want? Yes. I smiled. I'd spent years watching executives treat people like replaceable software updates. Fire someone. Hire someone else. Move on. They assumed systems ran themselves. Now suddenly, the invisible employee mattered. I answered carefully. Nothing. Pause. Richard sounded confused. What? I don't want anything. Long silence. Then, Claire, be reasonable. I laughed softly. Reasonable. Yesterday Vanessa publicly fired me without understanding my job. Today I was unreasonable. Fascinating. I lowered my voice. You know what's funny, Richard? No answer. 3 years. I stared at rain gathering against the window. 3 years working 70-hour weeks. Silence. I continued. 3 years preventing disasters none of you even knew existed. Pause. Then your management team fired me because somebody noticed I worked overnight. Still silence. Then I finished. And now suddenly everyone remembers my phone number. Richard didn't speak for several seconds. Finally, Vanessa acted independently. Ah, there it was. Corporate survival instinct. Sacrifice middle management. Classic. I smiled. So now this is Vanessa's fault? He exhaled slowly. She misunderstood security reports. MHM. We're handling internal accountability. Of course they were. Some emergency board meeting somewhere. Greg sweating through his suit. Vanessa realizing perfume can't solve federal compliance violations. Beautiful image. Then suddenly another call notification appeared on my screen. Unknown Washington, D.C. number. Interesting. Government. I interrupted Richard. Hold on. What? I have another call. Claire, why? I hung up. Accepted second line. A woman answered immediately. Professional tone. Sharp. Miss Carter. Yes. This is Melissa Grant with Interstate Medical Transport Regulatory Division. There it was. Faster than expected. She continued. We're conducting an automated compliance review, connected to North Bay Distribution. I smiled slightly. Of course they were. Government systems love documentation. And documentation loved me. Melissa continued. Our records indicate you were listed as primary supervisory certification holder for Project Atlas. Correct. Pause. Then, our system shows certification deactivation yesterday. Also correct. She lowered her voice slightly. Can you confirm cause of separation? There it was. The moment everything shifted. I stared quietly at the city outside. Cars moving. Rain falling. Normal morning. Meanwhile, somewhere inside North Bay headquarters, executives were probably realizing the situation had moved beyond internal damage control. This wasn't corporate anymore. Federal regulators were now involved. I answered calmly. Yes. Please state cause. I smiled, then said 5 words. I was fired for working. Silence. Long silence. Then Melissa asked carefully, can you elaborate? I sat back slowly, opened the termination PDF they'd forced me to sign yesterday, and read aloud exactly what Vanessa wrote. Violation of unauthorized system access security policy. Pause. Then I added quietly. I was performing mandatory overnight compliance supervision duties, required under federal transport certification. Silence again. I could hear typing now. Fast typing. Melissa finally answered. Understood. Professional tone. Cold now. Administrative. The dangerous kind. Then she said one sentence. One beautiful sentence. Ms. Carter, North Bay Distribution may have triggered a federal transport compliance breach. I closed my eyes and smiled. Guys, now, the avalanche had officially started. And nobody inside that building had any idea how bad this was about to become. Corporate collapse has a sound. Most people imagine shouting, screaming executives, phones ringing, people running through hallways carrying stacks of papers. That's television. Real collapse sounds quieter. Keyboard clicks, conference room doors locking, lawyers speaking softly, carefully chosen words replacing panic. I found that out around 11 that morning. Melissa from Interstate Medical Transport had barely ended the call when my inbox started exploding. 32 unread messages. North Bay executives. Legal department. HR. Internal directors. Even Greg. That one made me laugh. The same man who signed my termination paperwork less than 24 hours earlier was now sending me messages marked urgent. I opened his email first. Subject. Need immediate discussion. Body. Claire, there appears to have been a serious misunderstanding regarding yesterday's events. Please contact me as soon as possible, so we can resolve this situation professionally. Professionally. Interesting word choice. Yesterday, professionalism apparently meant firing me without understanding what I actually did. Today, professionalism meant begging. I deleted it. Next email. Vanessa. Subject. Regarding yesterday. Body. Claire. After reviewing recent developments, I believe there may have been procedural errors during your termination process. I would appreciate the opportunity to speak privately and clarify certain misunderstandings. I stared at the screen for a second, then laughed so hard I nearly spilled coffee on my keyboard. Procedural errors. Yesterday she treated me like some security risk. Today suddenly paperwork had mistakes. Amazing how accountability works when money disappears. I deleted hers too. Then my phone rang again. Richard Hale. Third time today. I answered immediately. Not because I wanted to help. Because I wanted to hear the fear. His voice sounded terrible. The confident executive tone was gone. Now he sounded like a man who hadn't slept. Claire. No greeting. Interesting. I stayed quiet. He exhaled slowly. We've received formal notice. There it was. Federal Review. I walked toward the couch and sat down. What kind of notice? Long pause. Then quietly. Regulatory investigation. I nodded. Expected. He continued. Atlas has been suspended pending compliance review. MHM. All pharmaceutical routing operations have stopped. Obviously. Another pause. Then he finally said it. We need you back. Not want. Need. That word mattered. I stared at the ceiling. Small crack near the light fixture. Needed to fix that eventually. Funny what your brain notices when powerful people start panicking. Richard continued. We can reverse your termination immediately. No. We'll triple your salary. I smiled. Interesting. Less than 24 hours. That was all it took. Yesterday I was disposable. Today I was suddenly worth executive-level compensation. I answered calmly. You can't reinstate federal certification. Silence. Then. We'll hire legal counsel. No. We'll pay any amount. I sat up slowly. Then answered. Richard. Yes. You still don't understand. Pause. I continued. This stopped being your company problem 3 hours ago. Long silence. Then quietly. What do you mean? I opened Melissa's last email. Official government header. Exactly what I expected. I read part of it aloud. North Bay Distribution is under immediate federal compliance review for unlawful interruption of Certified Supervisory Transport Authority under Interstate Medical Regulation Code 48A. Nothing. Dead silence. Then Richard whispered. Oh God. Exactly. I stood and walked to the kitchen. Outside rain had stopped. Sun breaking through clouds. Perfect timing. Then suddenly I heard another voice through the phone. Female. Sharp. Aggressive. Vanessa. Apparently they had her on speaker. Of course. Her voice came fast. Desperate now. Claire, listen. No perfume confidence this time. Pure survival. We can fix this. I smiled immediately. Can we? Interesting. She continued. I'm willing to personally correct the termination filing. Personally. Yesterday she enjoyed firing me. Today suddenly we were friends. I answered quietly. You know what bothers me most, Vanessa? Silence. Not even breathing. I continued. It wasn't getting fired. No answer. It wasn't losing the job. Still silence. I walked slowly toward my desk. Looked at one of the old frame certification plaques I'd brought home months earlier. Then I finished. It was the fact that you never once asked what I actually did here. Long silence. Then very quietly she said. I thought you handled reporting. There it was. I closed my eyes. Reporting. 3 years building Atlas compliance architecture. Thousands of overnight interventions. Dozens of prevented shipping disasters. And somehow management thought I handled reporting. I laughed softly. Then said. You destroyed your own company because you couldn't be bothered learning how it functioned. Nobody answered. Not Richard. Not Vanessa. No one. Then I heard distant shouting. More voices. Someone opening a door. Another male voice suddenly entered. Unfamiliar. Calm. Cold. Professional. Lawyer. He spoke directly. Miss Carter. This is Daniel Reeves, External Compliance Counsel retained by North Bay Distribution. Well, that escalated quickly. He continued. We'd like to discuss potential consulting arrangements. I smiled. There it was. The inevitable pivot. First denial. Then panic. Then negotiation. Classic corporate survival cycle. I sat back down. What kind of consulting? Pause. Then, temporary emergency oversight restoration. Interesting. Very interesting. I opened my calculator app. Started typing numbers. Daniel kept talking. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation. I interrupted. How much revenue has Atlas lost in the last 22 hours? Silence. No answer. So I answered. Approximately $36 million. Long silence. Then Daniel said quietly, that sounds accurate. I smiled. Good. At least one competent person entered the room. I typed one final number. Then answered. Okay. Suddenly everyone on speaker seemed to inhale. Richard spoke first. You'll do it. I leaned back slowly. No. Silence. Beautiful silence. Then I continued. But I'll consult independently. Daniel immediately responded. Name your price. I stared at the calculator screen. Then smiled. Funny thing about value. People never know yours until they lose access to it. I answered calmly. $250,000 emergency contract. Silence. Absolute silence. I imagined their faces. Greg sweating. Vanessa pale. Executives staring at legal counsel. Then I added. Paid in advance. Richard finally spoke. That's outrageous. I laughed. Yesterday I apparently wasn't valuable enough to keep employed. Today $250,000 was outrageous. Beautiful. I stood and walked toward the mirror near my hallway. Looked at myself for a second. First time in years I looked relaxed. Then I finished. No, Richard. I smiled slightly. What's outrageous? Pause. Is firing the woman holding together your entire infrastructure because middle management didn't understand her job description. Silence. Then I ended the call. No goodbye. No hesitation. Just click. I stood there for several seconds. Apartment completely quiet again. And for the first time in years, I realized something. I had spent my entire career making companies richer while making myself invisible. Never again. 3 days later, North Bay officially entered federal compliance suspension. 7 executives resigned. Greg disappeared from LinkedIn. Vanessa was terminated. Ironically, for procedural misconduct. That one made me laugh for 10 straight minutes. A week later, I registered my own consulting company, Carter Logistics Advisory Group. My certifications transferred immediately. Within 12 days, I signed 2 private healthcare distribution contracts. Combined value? $680,000. And North Bay? Their stock dropped 19% after regulatory disclosure. Atlas was suspended indefinitely. Investors fled. Board members started resigning. Everything they built started collapsing. All because management thought the quiet woman working late nights was expendable. 2 months later, I rented my own office downtown. Small place. Big windows. Wood floors. No executives. No corporate politics. No Vanessa. At exactly 12:07 p.m. I sat at my new desk reviewing a client compliance contract. Sunlight hitting the table. Phone silent. Peaceful. Then my assistant knocked gently. She leaned in smiling. Claire. I looked up. Yes. She held the receiver. It's North Bay. I stared for 2 seconds, then opened the lunch container sitting beside my keyboard. Turkey sandwich. Fresh coffee. Perfect afternoon. I took one bite. Chewed slowly. Smiled. Then answered. Tell them I'm busy working. I swallowed. Looked down at the company logo printed on the old North Bay badge I kept inside my drawer. Then casually dropped it into the paper shredder beside my desk. Plastic cracked. Metal snapped. The machine hummed quietly. And just like that, the last piece of my old life disappeared. Funny thing about companies, they spend years ignoring the people holding everything together. Because invisible workers make success look easy. Until one day, they remove the wrong person. And suddenly, the entire machine remembers exactly who was keeping it alive. Too late. By then, she's already building something better. And this time, she owns the machine.